90% of people don't want to do what's uncomfortable, and they end up working for entrepreneurs that are willing to get themselves uncomfortable.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Gym Break Cast, where we sit down with professionals within the studio and fitness space and kind of just go through all those visionary ideas that come to all of us as entrepreneurs and leadership in the space, and kind of go through all those things that come through us, while we're taking our normal daily gym break. So today I have a really special guest. We kind of ranted a little bit before the cast here, but I'll let her introduce herself and then we'll just kind of go from there.
Hi, everyone. My name's Vanessa Severiano. I'm a growth strategist, a consultant, and business coach in the fitness and wellness space. I've been in the industry for 24 years now, so I'm aging myself. I'm 45, and I love jamming about fitness and wellness and all things business. So thank you for having me here today, Zach.
Well, of course, of course. We've we may have crossed paths a few times, just not ran into each other. I was just recently at the Beyond Active event in New York a few months back, and I also know that as I started to push more into building the connection in the industry, that your name's popped up quite a bit on LinkedIn, and I'm glad we finally got to have you on the cast and kind of go through this stuff. I think this is going to be a very special one because I do feel like strategy is something that gets underutilized. We'll just say that way, underutilized, especially as studios and businesses in general grow to a certain point in business. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about how you got into this and what got you to kind of evolve into the strategic side of helping entrepreneurs?
Okay, great. So, well, first of all, I just want to speak to your point about like my name coming up. And I think it's funny because like the wellness and fitness world is so big, but it's so small at the same
It is.
time. And it's kind of incestuous, which is why I always tell people in the industry, especially people that are coming up, never burn a bridge because it is a small and incestuous world and you never know when you're gonna come across somebody or when your reputation is gonna be spoken about, so always act accordingly. So yeah, I kinda got into the industry by accident. So back in 2001, when I graduated from college, I had gone to school and I have 2 degrees in interpersonal and organizational communication. Everybody's probably like, "What does that mean?" And, English literature. I always thought that I was gonna be an attorney, but when I graduated school, I was kinda like, "Okay, now what?" My nightmare was to be, like, going to work every day wearing a suit and sitting in a cubicle. So, when I got home from college, I grew up right outside of New York City, and I just started applying for jobs, and my one criteria was I wanna work for a brand that seems like fun.
Mhm.
So I was 21, right? So at that time, that's your criteria. So I was like, I don't want to go to work every day doing something that seems like a drag. And so I was very fortunate to get my first job at the Crunch corporate office in New York City. And that was when Doug Levine, the original owner, was still there. And we went through the process of selling the company for $90 million in 2001. That was like a bangbuster price, right? To Bally Total Fitness. And then I was there through the brand conversion and the oversight of Bally's. And then obviously the Crunch brand has changed hands numerous times and now it's evolved to a fitness franchise, which is beautiful to see the brand growing. But I kind of started out by accident, I guess. And then one opportunity led to another. I ended up coming to Miami for Crunch on a work project. And when I came down to Miami and I saw the warm weather and the water, growing up in New York, the water is brown. I was like, this is for me. And so then I quit my job at Crunch and I moved down to Miami and I was on the opening team for the first two Equinox locations in Florida. And then fast forward 24 years, one thing just led to another.
That's how it works, right? It's weird how our journey dictates kind of the direction we go or the path that we end up taking, and how it's a subconscious way, as you said before the cast, if you're not growing, right? if you're not growing you, who you are, your brand, how you're trying to evolve as a person. I mean, I started a little bit different, but still ended in the same spot. I started in the sports industry because of my athletic background, and it kind of took a shift. But I love that. I love that, especially the crunch side, because they're actually one of my clients, the corporate office. I work with Danielle over there, and the marketing director over there now. So it's good to have that subtle connection of you working with crunch. So one thing that you really emphasize is especially for new entrepreneurs that maybe want to get into the space and or these leadership roles that are trying to grow their studios to the next phase is what it really takes to be a builder. You know, what it really takes to be someone that's really able to start looking at the visionary side a little bit more. And can you go a little bit further into that?
Yeah, I think in our business and the nature of the beast is we can easily get caught just fighting fires, right? And so it's like employee issues, it's equipment issues, facility issues, right? Member issues. I mean, there's constantly like things that are coming up. Our business is so dynamic. There's so many people, there's so many operating hours. We're rarely closed, and so we can easily get sucked in the day to day. But I think in business, you need two things. You need one of to have a visionary. So a visionary is somebody that can see the big picture. It's like, where are you headed? Where do you want to go? What is the big picture vision for this business? And if you're a solopreneur or entrepreneur and you don't have necessarily a brick and mortar space, like what is the vision for yourself, right? Where are you headed? And then you have the operator. Now, if you're an operator, you're more about executing. So you're in the day to day. So doing the thing, right? And I think that for entrepreneurs and figureheads of businesses and leaders, you need to put on your visionary cap and you need to find people that can operate the day to day, right? So you can't only be an operator. You have to have a strategic direction of where you're going. I think the best and most successful businesses are people that have a visionary that's kind of steering the ship, and then all the people that are putting the pieces of the puzzle together that are operators. And some of the best partnerships that I've seen are people that bring complementary skills. So somebody that's a visionary and then somebody that's an operator. And when they come together, that's when the magic happens.
I do. I see it all the time. I mean, there's a fine line there. I think, especially once you get to a certain size, for studios, I usually see it at about the 600K a year mark when they start realizing, oh, maybe there is something to values and vision and being a visionary, you know. But you see a lot of those big, like most successful brands out there it's like there's 2 of them. There's one that's really good with the visionary, the connection, going out there and trying to make change and lead the vision, and then there's always one that's an operator. When you get sucked into both, you know, me, for instance, I'm at a point where I still need an operator, an integrator, if you wanna call it an integrator. Like, I still need that, but I don't necessarily have the budget yet to do so, and I am an integrator at heart. I am an operator, but I love building. I'm a creative as well. I create brands. So, having to balance that knowing that, hey, like, trying to slowly let the operation side go with teammates and then trying to find that very special person that can still hit those operational things could be a challenge. So I know that you talk a lot about how you can kind of turn challenges into opportunities um, with every skill. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? Like what kind of challenges do you see or mindset shifts do these owners have to make to kind of push themselves to taking those challenges and turning them into greater opportunities?
I mean, just to speak to your point of like switching gears and putting on those different hats of like visionary and operator. I think it also depends on like what kind of business you're operating and what stage of business you're in, right? So like for example, like me right now, I'm a consultant, right? And a business coach. So I have to wear both hats. I'm a business of one, right?
Yep.
So there's times that I would recommend if somebody was in that position to kind of like time block. And it doesn't necessarily mean like you have to like have it written on your calendar. I mean, yeah, those are all good things, but sometimes like you become so structured and crazy that it's like impossible to keep up. So like the reality is of it is just like allocate time when you're thinking of the big picture, like what are the future projects you want to work on? What are like other services that you want to bring to light, other products, like what brands do you want to align yourself with and work with? And then like that's like one part of your day where you're dedicating a specific amount of time. And then another chunk of time when you're like doing the damn thing, right? You're operating and putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. I think for leaders in fitness and wellness, it's just like very important to have a visionary and big picture to steer the ship for the team. The team needs to know, I think, like, especially like at the end of the day, our business, a lot of times, like the reality of it is it's being run by people that are making $15 an hour working the front desk, right? Like, those
Yeah.
are people that are interacting with your core business, your core base. They need to, especially with the younger generations, they need to feel connected with the vision. It's not just about like, oh, the 5 hours that I'm working the front desk checking people in. It's like, what does this business stand for? What's the mission? What's the vision? Where are we headed? And like, how can I be a part of that? Like, people, especially now with like social media and like work from home, like people are feeling like super isolated, right? That's one of the reasons that what we do is so important, fitness and wellness. We bring people together in real life. And so I think we have to remember that for our employees too. Like, we have to make our employees feel connected. And when we are steering the ship and constantly reminding our employees of like why we do what we do and where we're headed, it makes the like mundane day-to-day tasks seem a little bit more like elevated. It makes employees more motivated to go the extra mile, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that topic because I'm actually in the process right now. I had to switch from visionary. I'm creating a webinar right now on that exact topic, on the exact topic of employees and vision and values and finding the right people to come in. And I think there's something and you're right. I think that, back, I'll just say 4 years ago, everyone was like, oh, everyone's going to work out from home. Everyone wants to work out from home. And I think that funny enough is it actually started to do the opposite. People started getting depressed. People started being like me, for instance, I didn't want to work out from home anymore. Like, I'm like, I need to go back to finding my community, going out there. And people do want to go get those experiences. They do want to have their community. And I don't think it just comes down to the members. I think it also comes down to the employees. How do we feel connected? How do we have a community that we can work with? And I think a big staple that happens within this industry is we need to bring in leadership. I think that we go strictly from, like you said, a manager behind a desk who may just be answering calls that doesn't understand really how to lead, to the owner of the company who's kind of 99% of the time taking a back seat and just being like, okay, you run it and I'll run through the operations day to day, and isn't really looking at how we can bring vision and values into this industry. And I think that that's something that's highly needed right now, for people like us to be able to, I'm not going to say us, but more like anyone who wants to find their mental clarity space, right?
I mean, I'm so glad you're bringing this up because like you're speaking my language. I think like right now, it's not about like people think like, oh, you develop an SOP, you develop a checklist, and then you hand it to somebody and they just have to check the boxes. They just have to like do the checklist every day and like that's it. And that's not the way it works, right? People need to like the most successful leaders know how to connect with people. We are in the relationship business. I know sometimes people say we're in the service business. Yes, we are, but we are in the relationship business. And it all starts with the team culture and community within. I
Yeah.
think a lot of times people are so focused in our industry on the clients and acquisition and how do we get more clients and what's the marketing language and how much are we spending on digital ads. What they fail to realize is when you start with the employees, then you're investing in your employees. You're basically investing in a retention strategy for all those people that you're acquiring. Because if you're just constantly bringing in new members and bleeding them out the back end, you're not profitable. So, I mean, the thing that people love to talk about that's like so sexy is like, their revenue that they brought in, how many new members, but they don't like to talk about all the unsexy stuff in business, which is systems, process, and culture.
Wait,
That's what moves the needle.
and here's the funny thing, because here's what I try to preach all the time. Yes, building a team is an operations play, but a lot of times these studios will come into me and they'll be like, "Here's our vision, here's our mission, here's our values." They'll put it down on a piece of paper, they'll hand it to me, and I know for a fact that none of them preached their own values. They just had someone go out there. They found someone that said, "Hey, we're gonna write down these values. This is what we're gonna relay." And it's back to your marketing thing. Since we do marketing, I saw this. I was like, I'm stuck behind a computer screen. It's not about technology. Yeah, digital marketing, all that stuff can work, but you should be involving it with your community. And I think that to really live by that vision, to really be able to grow a team, a very simple step would be, as a leader or as an owner of a studio, you should be living those values every day. That's how you're going to build. That's how you're going to lead by example. That's how you're going to understand the lingo, the behavior of the types of people that you want to bring in. I think it's safe to say that you're right. Like, we just don't, the studio industry just doesn't bring in those values, or they don't look at it as a branding play.
But you know why, Zach? Because managing people is fucking hard.
It is. It is very hard. It is
Managing
very hard.
people, I don't know if I'm gonna get Uh, I I'm very passionate about this topic, so
Mhm.
sorry for letting
It
that
is.
slip, but it's just facts, right? Real talk. It's
Yeah,
like managing people is really hard, and
it
it's
is.
easy to put up core values or a mission statement on a website or hang it up on your wall. It's hard to live it day in and day out.
Yeah.
It's hard to get buy-in from employees. It's hard to deal with all of the moving parts of mentoring people, nurturing them, attracting good talent, like, that's
Yeah.
hard.
It is. It's probably the hardest thing. Probably the hardest thing. It's but the most important and the hardest is people, right?
But we can't run and operate our businesses without them, so we've gotta figure it out, right? The best leaders are people that really connect with people. I mean, that's what it's all about. It's like you can read I've worked with so many people that, all different kinds of people and different teams, ones that were amazing
Mhm.
and ones that failed miserably, and I have to say that the people that are really amazing leaders are people that led with their heart. They were sincere, they were curious about other people, they cared about them. And I've worked with terrible leaders that have done all the research, read all the books, are the intellectuals, have the fancy degrees, but are just not people. They're not a people person, right?
Yeah.
And you have to be a people person in this industry. It's that's how you get ahead, and this is, again, just all about building relationships and learning how to get the most out of somebody.
It could be intimidating for some people on here that are like, "Oh," because I think going back to your operator and your visionary side, I would say that a lot of operators are very, technical expert type individuals, right? They're very, "Hey, I like to sit behind and type stuff out and check the schedules and make sure people are getting stuff done." Um, they may feel a little intimidated by hearing, "Hey, I'm not necessarily a people person," because there are a lot of operators that are still out there. Does that mean that are owners? Does that mean that they can't succeed? No, they can. They just need to find a visionary to come in and help them. Or in my case, bring the visionary back and delegate the operation side, because even though I'm good at it, it burns me out. you know?
Right. Well, I mean, it's like the day-to-day grind can, like, eat away at you if you're really wanting to be somewhere else. So it's like, I think reflecting on your own strengths and weaknesses as the leader, I think it's like you can't force a square peg in a round hole. You have to objectively be able to look at yourself and look at your team and get the most out of who they are. Like I talk about this with my kids all the time. Like think about what comes easily and naturally to you. Like what comes naturally to you that's hard for other people. That's your like unique skill set and that's what you need to lean into. Conversely, like you can't force somebody that's like very like operationally focused, that's very detail oriented and put them in a sales role. Like, why would you do that? You're
Yeah.
taking a great asset and you're putting them and setting them up for failure. That being said, like talking about the visionary and the operator, like vision is nothing without execution. So I think one challenge that really comes up is sometimes like visionaries, they don't think like operators. And so they come up with this amazing plan, but then they fail to realize the people that are executing this plan are part time people working your front desk making $15 an hour. So you need to make it something that's like easily executable by the people that are going to execute and then connect the vision with the day-to-day operation and vice versa, right? The operator needs to connect with the visionary. And so that's when when you start talking about strategy, it's like it's nothing without execution.
Well,
Good execution.
and it's funny you say that because, I'm a living example of that, right? Like, going from completely, um, going in from complete, and I think this is a lot of startups and a lot of entrepreneurs when they start out, they're incomplete, they're in execution mode constantly. Back to what you were saying about, you have to be a people person. Like, I forgot that I was a people person. I forgot, you know, and because you get so caught up in the operations. And so for anyone who's a little bit like disgruntled because they may be like, well, I'm not really a people person. And you could probably give a good example of this as well. Like me, I wanted to go back out there and train myself to become that people person again. So what did I do? How do I become a better leader? I started to speak. I started to go out. I started to help people do more workshops, and just try to communicate better. You got your communication and what you got, but I got mine in visual communication. So I've always been more of a visual type like communicator, but I had to bring back and learn the speak, the how to be a better people person. And so that could be a good step for anyone who's like at that point where it's like, well, how do I be a people person?
Yeah, you can train yourself. I mean, you gotta like learn these skills. I mean, it's like if you want to learn something, it's just about getting reps in, right? It's like,
Mhm.
listen, I had a podcast. I had a podcast back in the day. I had 150, I recorded 150 episodes. The first like 5 were so bad because I was so nervous. I was like stuttering listen back on them. But after reps, you get better. It's like whenever you're a beginner at anything, right? Like my first sales presentation was so bad. I heard my voice quivering. I was shocked when the person agreed to buy it from me. Right. But it's just about getting reps in. And like the more you do something, the better you become at it. So, yeah, you can train yourself to learn skills that you don't have. And I feel like that's one of the biggest skill sets of entrepreneurs is like being able to be a beginner again and being open to being like a never ending learner that's like always putting yourself in areas that are uncomfortable and just going through it anyway because 90% of people don't want to do what's uncomfortable and they end up working for entrepreneurs that are willing to get themselves uncomfortable.
Well, and that's a good point you bring up because that is true. I think that the leader of the organization tends to have at least, a certain amount of time in each position that he eventually hires within the company until it gets to a certain point, correct? You have to lead by example. You're going to have to learn something, if it be operations, if it be finance, if it be, you know, marketing, whatever it may be. You don't have to do it for a living, but learn it enough so that you can lead by example and learn how to grow your business for that. So you're right. We do have to learn all the time. Last year, to become a better leader, I got up on the TEDx stage, and to do so, I think I did within a 7-month period. I think I was on 60 podcasts just to be like, I want to get my voice. I want to improve. I want to be better at speaking, and I still have a lot way to go, a long way to go, but I'm still at that point where, I knew that, hey, this was something new for me and I'm going to have to do it and not have an ego and just think that I'm this badass business owner that, is making a good amount of money, you know what I mean? So I 100% agree with you there. And so back to that execution and good idea situation, because I am an operator and a visionary. Like, I geeked out last week by creating since I am kind of a CMO type role right now, is creating this whole SOP and this whole structure, doing all the recordings, talking through my team through it, from the operations side, telling them the vision. This is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to go. Um, but I noticed that, just through the last couple of years of the transition and growth of my brand and in the business that I've been growing, that I went from complete and utter chaos of operations and having no communication to leaning the exact opposite and having too many meetings with no execution, to now realizing, hey, now we're getting to a point where we don't need all these meetings. We need to go back. We need to start executing again.
That's entrepreneurship, baby. You learn from doing the thing, right?
Yep,
Like,
yep.
it's so funny. Like, people that are listening to this might fall into this category because I know I have. It's like you want to do all the research, like listen to the podcast, read the books on leadership, look at the LinkedIn articles, read about what everybody's doing. But like, you need to do the thing. Like,
Yeah.
we learn from our biggest mistakes. And that's one thing I've learned from like being a parent, being a manager, being a leader in work, is like people don't learn from like what you tell them. Like, I could have told you like, "Oh, do this, do that," but you need to learn your way. And sometimes
Yeah.
we learn the biggest lessons from our mistakes, and that's just facts.
Well, and it's hard too, because no matter what kind of studio you have, what kind of business you have, operations are all different. And I'm not going to go into the whole niching and niche situation because I'm in marketing and I can go on hours for that. But what I could kind of go into is the whole premise of, learning from your failures. I think that you're right. I think that we have a tendency to, especially at the beginning, to look down on our failures and put ourselves down a lot, when those are actually the things that are going to help us get to the next level. I don't think any business is the same. And so I had to get to a point where I was like, this is my brand. This is my business. I don't need to read, and I still read, of course, but I don't need to like take some huge SOP that was created from a template and hand it to me and say, oh, I need to run my business this way. Will it help in some way, form, or another to develop it my own way? Yes. But it's all about developing it your own way as a business owner. And I think that's the funnest part.
I know, but I think that like a lot of us, and I'm guilty of this myself, so I'm not just like preaching here, is like we want to avoid discomfort, and that's kind of like the
Oh,
irony of what you were just mentioning,
yeah,
right?
it
Like
is.
we know like mistakes are our biggest teachers, but then we don't want to go through the quote unquote failure or the experience. But it's interesting. I was actually listening to a podcast recently, The Startup of You by Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn. And he
Yeah.
said something so profound that really like stuck with me. And he said that the best entrepreneurs make uncertainty their friend. And it's like not having all the answers and not having it all figured out and like leaning into that and learning as you go is the way. Because even big organizations, even people that you look up to that seem like they have it all figured out, they're learning as they go too. So it's
Oh.
like
Oh, yeah. It's funny because I preach this all the time. We talk about so many small brands, startups, under a million or even under 10 million, they're always being like, oh, they try to look bigger than they are. They're always out there like, trying to grow and say, oh, we have all these employees. I was like, hey, listen, even the biggest brands, they actually want to be more like us because now they have so many employees. It takes so much time, energy, change to make any sort of needle within the the change of their brand and what they're trying to do. But that uncertainty you're saying, it's true. I mean, I think it's in all of us. I still have my days all the time where, I'm like, man, I'm not doing it today. And I'll use a great example. I had a paid speaking gig that I got for this month. And it took me, months. I'm kind of trying to build the momentum. I'm going out and speaking more, doing more workshops. And I got a speaking gig. They picked me. We went through the whole process. I signed all the documents, got my plane tickets, and then they emailed me and said, we only had 6 people sign up, like literally this week. We only had six, it was last week, 6 people sign up for this. So we're going to cancel your workshop. And I'm like, I was just bummed for like a whole day. And I'm like, you know what? I'm allowed to be bummed, but tomorrow I'm going to get back into it and I'll come out stronger. But it's okay to have those days and that that sense, just as long as you're willing to pick yourself back up and try to learn from, well, what can I learn from that scenario?
Well, I think it's like, one, it's just always being prepared. So you didn't lose the momentum of all the prep work that you put into that workshop, and now you can take that momentum and apply it to the next workshop,
Yeah.
come up with a workshop of your own instead of like relying on somebody else to fill up the workshop. You host your own workshop.
Yeah.
And so like you're kind of like the captain of the ship instead of like, depending. I mean, I think that's like one of the biggest challenges, right?
Yeah.
It's like you partner with somebody else and it doesn't work out. And I think that there's like so many things in our world and in our life that we look at that like dictate success, right? And so it's hard to get caught up in like the definition of success, but like you still put in that work, you still put in the reps of getting ready, and now you can like take that and apply it to something else. And I think, to speak to an earlier point that you mentioned about like studio owners and gym owners looking at other brands and like wanting to be them, I think it's very important to like meet yourself where you're at
Yeah.
and the stage of
It
business
is.
that you're at, because like I have literally worked with startup brands that have like minimal budget, and they're sending me ads from Nike and Gatorade telling me like, "Oh, let's create something similar." I'm like, do you realize what the budget is and the amount of people that put this ad together?" And then, like it's like manage expectations. And I think that, you know, also, like, a lot of gym owners and studio owners look at they confuse having more locations with being more successful, but
Mhm.
the name of the game in our business is profitability,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
you can have 5 locations and they're bringing in $10,000 a month, or you can have one location that's bringing in $50,000 a month. Like, which would you rather have, right?
Yeah.
And so, more locations, more members, more team members, higher overhead, more insurance, more operating expense. And so, like, it's easy to confuse growth with just more locations, like more signs up on storefronts. But I think it's really important to lean into profitability, and that should be the focus as opposed to just opening more locations.
I love you say I have a couple stories in there. I had a prospect come to me very similar what you were talking about. And I used to dictate when I was validating the people that I could work with. I used to utilize the number of locations they had because I assumed that I knew a healthy studio where they would be number wise. And he came to me and he was like, "Oh yeah, I have two locations." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm expecting in my head, you know, at the low end 1.5, maybe 2. 2 is a nice, healthy spot. Um, and he was like, "Oh, we're making 300 a year with 2 locations." And I'm like, "Dude, you need to close one of those down." Right? I'm like, "You don't even you should be making more than that with 1 location." And it was kind of funny to me, but I see it all the time too. I see being a CMO myself, and working with a lot of campaigns, doing a lot of SEO campaigns, a lot of, branding packages and stuff, I see quite a bit. They get stuck in, I'm not going to say they get stuck in validation mode. Studio owners get stuck in validation mode. There is this hypothesis that I have come up with that I've realized that gyms get stuck, a lot of studios get stuck in that validation stage where they're like, oh, we have to validate. And to them, that's, let's go out and do all this marketing everywhere and do all this stuff. And I'm like, dude, you could basically grow your business to your studio to $1 million by just, doing this and this. You don't need fancy Facebook ads. You don't need that. That stuff costs a lot of money, like you said. Like you don't.
And it's getting more expensive. It's
Yeah.
getting harder to get in
Oh,
front of people.
it is. It is. It's getting very hard. And that leans back to what we talked about with team and advocacy. I mean, for me personally, I always my two biggest things I tell studio owners when we jump on a call is I'm like, you know what the two criteria are for people to pick your studio? And they're like, what? I'm like, how close you are to their house and how the customer service is. Price, of course, is part of it too. Price and all that. But I think that price can easily be, it's kind of in that middle range of a value sell and a product sell. You're like right in the middle ground there. You can sell off customer service and your team are your advocates and allow them to, with the culture and the customer service that they provide, allow them to kind of be the one that build the retention up in the studio and provide your existing members to bring more people in.
I mean, it's all comes down to experience, right? Like you
Yeah.
can command a higher price point. I think, I'm from back in the day before boutique studios came into play, but the boutique studios really like shook up the gym and fitness world
Yeah.
because it's like, oh, wait, we've been charging like $79 a month. And then here comes this like unique brand that like only does one thing and they charge 250 a month. Like, what in the world? So it just goes to show like, less is more. You can do less things, but if you do them really freaking well, you can charge more and command a higher price point. It all comes down to value.
It does, it does. I think it's very similar in every industry because I kinda went to it through it too. If I guess we could go into the niching or niching, however you wanna call it, spectrum, but, I see a lot of people saying, "I need a niche right away." Like, "I need a niche right away," and I'm actually totally against that because I always say, "Hey, no, you need to figure out what works for you, what works out, test different things, validation mode, right? Like, let's see what works, let's see what doesn't. And then as time goes on and you start building some normal business, memberships and retention and all that fun stuff, then slim down, focus much more on team and values. And I think I just see it as a common stage indicator, to be honest with you, at a certain point in a studio's growth of when they need to do certain types of things within the branding and marketing world. But I'm just ranting now. So yeah, I think that what you were saying with everything it really depends on the studio, right?
I mean, there's a lot of factors at play that determine the success of a
Oh
business,
yeah.
right? It's like what you said about the location, what I talked about with profitability, because you could be bringing in, $60,000 a month. And if your rent is $2,000 a month, it's very different from if you're in a prime
Yeah.
location and your rent is $20,000 a month, right? So, like, that's like something to think about. And I think that's unfortunately a lot of studio owners are not set up for success when they do not negotiate good lease terms. And that's one of the benefits of getting involved in, a franchise or somebody that helps you negotiate lease terms, because nothing makes me sadder than seeing somebody that's like a fitness professional that opens up their own gym or studio and they just don't necessarily know like the business side of things of negotiating lease terms and tenant improvements and all these tricks and tips of ways that you can get a favorable setup from the get-go. And then they give it their all because this is a passion-led
Yeah.
business and it doesn't work out, because there's so many factors, but it's like it's the team, it's the marketing, it's the product, right? Like you can't outsell a bad product. People need to know that. Like if your experience that you're delivering is not up to par, you can't expect the sales team to be selling it like it's hotcakes. So really being able to look at all of these things objectively, knowing your strengths and weaknesses and what you as a leader bring to the table, and then hiring around to fit in the gaps that you don't have the expertise in, that's like kind of like where you start.
Yeah, we could easily go into that with hiring the people around you because I mean, I think we've all dealt with this in some aspects of they just don't. Studio owners just don't like to spend money on marketing. I don't know if it's just them or if it's everyone, but you know, I've seen just the numbers. I've seen just the numbers of studio owners be like, I'll see someone with like the average is I think even with like 7 to 8 locations, they spend maybe $3,000 a month on marketing. And I'm like, to me as a marketer, I'm like, I think that means your operations needs a little bit more work. I mean, it's easier said than done, of course, right? But
Yeah, I think it depends, honestly, Zach. Like, I think like old school is the new school. And like, if you are really good at relationships and
yeah,
creating grassroots local
yeah,
marketing and
I
cross
agree.
promotions and connecting with people in your immediate neighborhood and community, then you don't need to invest as much in your sales funnel of like digital marketing. And honestly, I have to say that like I have worked with so many digital marketing agencies and I feel like they take advantage of
Oh,
gym owners and studios because they'll show like flashy metrics that mean nothing. So,
agree.
like gym and studio owners, listen up. Like, do not let like impressions or reach like be a KPI that you're tracking with your
I
digital
hate it.
marketing
I agree
agency
with
because
you.
like
I agree with
that is just a number that's big that they'll show you, but it means nothing. What you should be tracking is your ad spend, how many leads did you generate? What was the conversion of
Yes.
those
No,
leads,
that's it.
right? Like,
That's it. Those are the 3 things you need to worry on. You know,
right? So
like
it's like don't get hosed, right? But yeah, I mean marketing is so many things, right? But I think don't underestimate grassroots marketing, right?
oh, and
Local relationships.
I'll be real with you. I would put grassroots marketing within the budget of marketing if I was to say, "Hey, this is marketing." And I 100% agree with you. When we kind of built out our secondary business, which is Gym Mark, we kind of really focus on this is about building a community. It's not about digital marketing. It's about everything together. So if when we're talking to our clients, I will say, "Hey, if you're just starting out, you need to be going door to door. Find the communities in your area. That's you. That's your job as a leader is to find those community areas that you can do partnerships, right? How do you find relatable businesses in your area that can be a vertical for you? And I like to use, for example, like if you're a yoga studio that focuses on, moms, prenatal, yoga, then maybe you have a partnership with the daycare that's right across the street from you, right? Like it's a good example of how you can use your local area to kind of help continue to build your community. I'm trying to change the spectrum on it because you're right. There's so many companies out there, for instance, and I won't name all of them, but that will be like, hey, we're just going to bring you a crap load of leads. I was just talking to someone yesterday and they're like, I've dealt with so many marketing companies and they'll bring me leads. And I'm like, your job isn't the salesman. Your job is the owner and to doing product, to focusing on leading. I'm like, you're not meant to be on 200 phone calls a day, like you
Well,
said.
and sometimes, like, lead generation is a big spectrum, right? So,
Yes, it
like,
is.
first of all, are they quality leads? Because I've also seen
Yeah.
digital ad agencies put a radius of 25 miles around a gym or studio and then bring in like a boatload of leads that never convert because the radius should be 3 to 5 miles around the gym or studio, not
That's
25
one
miles. Nobody's going to want to sit in
100% true.
traffic. To your point that you mentioned earlier, it has to be convenient. So, it's
Yes.
like, all the things, right? But
Yep.
I think like so one, digital marketing agencies need to be like managed from the gym owner and studio
Mhm.
side. It can't just be like a flip the switch and expect like great results. Like you have to ask great questions so that you're getting the right leads so that you're or work with somebody that specializes in gyms and studios that understands the nature of the business, not a
Yes.
digital agency that's working with hospital systems, that's working with car dealerships, and then they're working with you and they don't really understand the way the business works.
Oh, it's 100%, and I think it definitely goes twofold too. It's like, I do expect, when we're talking to these studio owners and we're helping them develop their marketing strategies, no matter what it may be, that, it's like, you need to have some laying in the game too. You're a leader at your gym, and you need to know enough about this so that when we're going through these metrics or we're figuring out how do we improve these metrics, that you understand what we're talking about, you know?
Yeah, and it's hard because, like, we live in a world where, like, everybody seems to be an expert at everything,
Yeah.
right?
Oh.
But it's like, I mean, I think there's no shame in asking for help. If you
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know something, like,
Mhm,
hire a coach, hire a consultant,
mhm.
get a book, download a course, something, like, educate yourself, but especially, like, when you're making financial investments, like, you need to know, like, where you're putting your money and understand how it all works before you start, like, investing large amounts of money and then you're not sure why it's not working.
I think it's safe to say that's in every field, right? Like, exactly. Like, it's really like, hey, you don't need to go in and do your whole marketing campaign, but at least understand the basics of it enough so that when you jump on the call, I mean, I've had prospects come to me. I hate to say this because it grinds my gears quite a bit, where they won't even read through my website and then they'll just expect me to jump on a call with them. And I'm like, did you know we don't even do that? Because did you go through and do your due diligence? Like, but vice versa too. It's the marketing agencies, specifically true in a couple of industries, but studios first and foremost. I think I'm kind of past that point in the business. I don't have to worry about those anymore. But I call those the basement dweller marketing agencies, right? They're the ones, especially now in the gym space. You see a lot of the, hey, pay per lead performance, and that's just some dude that said, hey, I'm gonna resell this to another person or a white label company, and I'm just gonna make a boatload of money, and because they think that that's how running a business works. But there's a lot of those marketing agencies out there, and it's like, but there's still quite a few good ones. And you know what the good ones do? The good ones do very similar to what the studios do. Me, I focus very big on values. We write all the content for Crunch right now. All of my team I hire has to follow when I bring them on, has to follow our values. I mean, I have a yoga instructor that writes all of our yoga content, right? Because they experience it, but they also can connect with it more, you know?
I love that. I love that.
So it really does come down to that type of stuff. And I think that really going back to the core basics of this cast is I think that it really just comes down to finding those challenges, those opportunities, and how do you take those challenges and make them into opportunities, learn from the mistakes of whatever you're doing and be able to turn them into opportunities. There's plenty of digital marketing agencies out there that suck. There's plenty of financial advisors out there that suck. There's
Oh my god, that are not fiduciaries and put you in the wrong direction. But yeah, I mean, I think that, like, there's there's so many lessons that we can learn from our mistakes, but we can't the thing is, like, we can't be afraid to keep moving forward. And I think the biggest advice that I would give, like, somebody in fitness and wellness is, instead of just, like, going and making changes and scrapping, because I've worked with entrepreneurs also that are constantly changing everything
Mhm,
constantly, and it's like
mhm.
the team can't keep up because they're just trying to see, like, what works, and they're throwing 10 million offers at the wall and seeing, like, what people buy, and they have, like, 10 different membership tiers and whatnot. I would say, before making any changes to what you're doing, talk to your customers. Like, your customers have the answer. Even if you have 150 members, like, your 150 members, ask them, talk to them. What would you like to see? How could I bring more value to you? How could I improve your experience?
Yes.
What would I do to, like, earn your business to refer a friend? Like, what do you have to see? Instead of just, like, making arbitrary changes and constantly, like, fighting those fires, like, speak to your customers, speak to your members, speak to your staff, because they also have great feedback on what clients are saying and why they're not buying or why they're canceling. and then put on your visionary hat and make those strategic decisions based on data. And maybe that's not from a spreadsheet, but it's from conversations that you've had with people. But make those decisions based on information, not just like a guess and like, oh, I saw this person on Instagram is offering this month. They're offering zero enrollment. So I'm going to offer zero enrollment. I saw like this is stuff
Yeah.
that's really happened to me as a consultant, like sending me screenshots of like different gyms and studio offers and saying, we should do this, we should do this, we should do this. It's like, talk to the customers, take time to do surveys, and understand your core business that you already have before adapting and making changes.
I think that goes back to what I was saying about getting out of validation mode, because I think that it's a mindset thing. It's a mindset thing. It's, hey, like you said, you don't have to do a million things. I had a studio. I'm in Arizona, and I was talking to a studio out of Tucson, and I remember the business owner was like, the studio down the street, we want to do what they're doing. They look like they're successful. And I just look at them, I'm like, you don't even know what their profit margin is. Like, you don't know what their operations is like. You want to just copy them? Like, you don't even know how to copy them, for one. I'm like, two, who says they're more what you would consider successful, of course, but he was the owner. He wasn't in the business. He wasn't the manager that I was talking to, but I saw the very same thing, and I was just like, all right, like, I don't think we're going to be able to work together, because I don't think that you understand the concept of what's going to take for this to make it to the next level. But it is funny you say that. But again, we could probably rant all day. I think that we could probably make this a 10-hour podcast if we really wanted to. But I know you and I both have things to do and people to see. So what we'll do here is we'll cut it off now. And then why don't you tell everyone a little bit on where they can find you, how they can get in contact with you.
Sure, thank you. So you can find me. My website is vanessaseveriano.com. Obviously, my last name is Portuguese and it's long, so I'm not going to spell it out for you. I'm sure Zach will be nice enough to put it in the show notes of this podcast, so you could just click on the link. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I also have a weekly free newsletter called The Growth Blueprint that I put out, that's delivered straight to your inbox every week with real stories, tips, and tricks. So if you want to sign up for that, that'd be amazing, and I'll see you there.
That's wonderful. Well, again, thank you for being on. I really appreciate you. This is another episode of the Gym Break Cast. I'm your host, Zach Coleman, and I hope everyone has a good day.
Thanks, Zach.